My parents claimed I was mentally ill to seize control of my salary, but I exposed the lie in court and left them speechless. I'm a 27-year-old mechanical engineer. About 2 months ago, I moved back to my hometown after 5 years of working my way up in the city. First as a junior technician, then as a lead designer. I finally landed a job at a multinational firm with a high salary, excellent benefits, everything I had worked for. The new office was surprisingly close to the town I grew up in, so while I waited for my lease to finalize on a place near the job, I decided to stay with my parents for a few weeks. That was my first mistake. My family is traditional, to put it mildly. There's this unspoken rule that every working son in our household must surrender his entire salary to our father until the day he gets married. No negotiations, no exceptions. My 2 older brothers did it without blinking. My father says it's for the household, but no one knows what happens to the money. The house never improves. Bills are still paid late. Groceries are sparse unless guests are coming. And yet no one asks questions. At first I tried to keep quiet, come home late, leave early, and stay out of everyone's way. But the silence didn't last long. One night during dinner, as everyone was picking at the bland lentils and cold flatbread, my father looked at me and asked, "Payday's coming up, right?" 5th of the month. I nodded. He didn't smile. "Send me the salary like your brothers. You know the rule." I laughed. It sounded absurd. I thought maybe he was joking, trying to ease the tension, but when I looked up, he was staring at me like I had insulted him. He repeated the sentence slower this time, like I was a stubborn child. I glanced at my mother, expecting her to maybe soften the blow or wave it off, but she doubled down. "It's what keeps the family together. Don't be selfish now." My eldest brother, who still lives at home despite being married with a 5-year-old son, joined in. "You think you're better than us now, just because you worked outside? Don't break what's already working." I turned to my second brother. We were always close growing up, and I remembered him being the only one who ever got into trouble for talking back. I asked him quietly if he had ever tried to say no to this. He wouldn't meet my eyes, just stared at his plate and kept chewing. The next morning my phone pinged, salary credited. It should have felt like a milestone. Instead, a message followed from my father asking for a screenshot of the payment. No congrats or well done, just a demand. I replied that I'd be keeping my salary, that I would manage my finances myself. No apology, just the truth. The silence in the house became suffocating after that. My mother stopped making meals for me. My brother's wife, who never liked me much anyway, started slamming doors whenever I entered the room. Even the child started whispering things like traitor under his breath, which I knew didn't come from cartoons. That night, my father called for a family discussion. We sat in the living room like strangers waiting for court. He said I was dishonoring the elders, destroying the trust of the household, and bringing shame. My mother cried and called me ungrateful, said I had become one of those arrogant city types who forget their roots and don't know how to respect traditions. I didn't yell, I didn't defend, I just said that managing my own salary wasn't rebellion, it was independence. It didn't sit well. After that, every interaction became charged. If I asked for salt at dinner, I got ignored. If I turned the TV on, someone would turn it off. I started noticing small things disappearing, my shaving kit, a charging cable, even the towel I used. It wasn't just passive aggression anymore, it was a message. That week I started quietly looking for an apartment. I figured I had a month before things boiled over, but after that night, I wasn't so sure anymore. I didn't grow up in a wealthy home, but I grew up thinking loyalty meant sacrifice, that giving meant love. Now I was being told that my worth to this family was tied directly to my income, and that if I didn't surrender it, I didn't belong anymore. So I started preparing to leave, not with drama, not with some big speech, but with a silent, careful plan. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that silence in my family isn't peace, it's a warning. Within a week of that dinner conversation, I found a furnished 1-bedroom apartment 10 minutes from my office. It wasn't luxurious, but it was clean, affordable, and, most importantly, mine. I signed the lease the same day without telling anyone at home. I picked the second floor for the street view and easy access. Over the next few nights, I began shifting my essentials: laptop, passport, certificates, and clothes. I kept things quiet, took one backpack at a time, and made sure no one noticed the gaps in my closet. On Wednesday evening, I got back from work and found my father sitting in my room. He was holding my bank card. I must have left it on the table in the morning when I was checking my account. He placed it down slowly and asked for my bank login, said he wanted to set up automatic savings for me, that he was doing me a favor like he did for my brothers. I told him I wasn't giving him access, not to my bank, not to anything. That conversation turned into shouting within minutes. He accused me of hiding money, said I was being deceitful, that I had brought shame to the household by acting like an outsider in my own family. I didn't yell back, I just walked out of the room. I locked up my remaining documents in my suitcase that night and kept the key in my pocket. The next morning, my eldest brother's wife stopped me in the hallway, smiling too sweetly. She leaned against the door frame and asked if I thought I was special. She said her husband never argued, that he knew how to be a man. She called me a selfish child playing dress-up in a man's job. That night, dinner was silent. No one served me. I had to go to the kitchen and help myself. Even then, there wasn't enough food left. Just one slice of cold bread and some leftover rice. I ate quietly and washed my own plate while the others chatted in the living room as if I didn't exist. By Friday morning, I woke up and something felt off. My drawers were half open, my backpack was unzipped, my documents were untouched, but my wallet was gone. I looked through every pocket, every shelf, nothing. I walked into the living room and asked directly. My father didn't even look up from the newspaper, just muttered, "Everything in this house flows through me." I told him I would file a police report for theft if my belongings weren't returned. That sentence brought the entire room to a stop. My eldest brother stood up halfway but didn't say a word. My mother started crying again in the corner. My father crumpled the newspaper and told me to go ahead, report the family if that's what I'd become. Later that evening, my second brother knocked softly on my door. He didn't say much, just placed the wallet on my desk and said, "You should leave before it gets worse." So I did. That Friday night, I packed everything in 2 suitcases and left before anyone could stop me. No shouting, no goodbyes. I left a short note on my bed. "I love you all, but I won't live under anyone else's control." I slipped the house key in the envelope and walked out without turning back. I moved in the same night. The landlord handed me the keys, and I spent my first night on a mattress on the floor, slept with the suitcase still zipped beside me. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. My mother called non-stop. I ignored every call. Around noon, I heard shouting in the hallway. I looked through the peephole and saw her standing outside my apartment, barefoot, hair unbrushed, screaming my name and banging on the door like it owed her something. My neighbor across the hall opened her door, confused and startled. A minute later, the building security came up. They spoke to her for a while. She shouted back something about ungrateful sons and ruined families. Eventually, they helped her back down to the lobby. That same evening, I installed a video doorbell with a live feed. I gave my building manager written instructions. No family member should be allowed into the building unless I personally authorize it. I showed them my ID, signed the document, and they logged it in the system. I didn't block my parents, not yet. But I blocked my eldest brother and his wife. I'd heard enough from them, enough sideways looks, passive jabs, and cruel comments. Once blocked, they never got through again. No texts, no calls, no visits. That door was shut. In 1 week, I had moved out, locked down my security, and taken back control of my life. One quiet step at a time. The news of my move spread faster than I expected. Within days, I started getting calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Uncles, aunts, cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Some were polite, pretending to check in. Others didn't even bother with small talk. They jumped straight into lectures about honor, shame, tradition. One cousin messaged me late at night to say the family WhatsApp group had turned into a battlefield. Screenshots were being passed around with my name in bold. I was being blamed for breaking the chain, for bringing disgrace to a home that had always stood strong on values. At work, during a coffee break, I took one of these calls outside. I didn't realize a colleague had followed me out for a smoke. He caught the tail end of the conversation, where someone threatened to show up at my office if I didn't fix the damage. When I walked back inside, the colleague waited until we were alone and told me straight. Talk to a lawyer, not just about harassment, but about making sure no one could lay claim to my earnings. I took his advice the same evening. The legal advisor was calm and clear. Unless I had ever signed over financial authority, which I hadn't, no one in my family had any legal right to demand a share of my salary. That conversation lasted 30 minutes, but it changed everything. From then on, I began documenting every single message, missed call, voicemail, and social media ping. I saved everything: voice recordings, screenshots, even timestamps. If anyone wanted to drag this into a legal corner, I'd be ready. Then came the trap. A cousin messaged me out of nowhere, said my mother had fallen ill, that it was serious, that she didn't have much time, and wanted to see me one last time. I ignored it at first. Then came another message with a blurry photo of her lying in bed, eyes closed. Against every warning in my head, I decided to go. I didn't drive to the house immediately. I parked down the street and watched from the corner. No ambulance, no visitors, lights were on. I walked in with caution. They were all there. Not just my parents, my brothers, my uncle, 2 cousins. Even the same aunt who hadn't spoken to me since last Eid. My mother was sitting upright, fully dressed, with a folder in her lap. My father stood beside her like a judge waiting to sentence a prisoner. Before I could ask what was going on, they closed the door behind me. The folder contained a typed agreement. It wasn't subtle. They wanted me to commit a fixed portion of my salary, 25%, to the family household, transferred monthly, effective immediately. I glanced at my second brother. He looked away. My eldest brother was the one who handed me a pen. I picked up the paper, tore it straight down the middle, and placed it on the table without a word. My father shouted. My mother screamed. Someone behind me kicked the door. I stood up and said one thing: "Try this again, and I'll file a harassment case." My father's face turned red. He slammed his palm on the table and shouted that I was no longer his son, that I was cut off, disowned, that I was never to return, not even for a funeral. I didn't reply. I walked past everyone, opened the door myself, and left the house without a backward glance. That night, I blocked both of my parents permanently. No messages, no voice calls, no door visits. From that point forward, they no longer had access to me in any way. It didn't end there. A week later, my manager called me into his office, said someone claiming to be a family friend had contacted the company, implying I was having mental health struggles and might not be fit to handle corporate accounts. I had seen this tactic before: reputation sabotage. My father had connections, not powerful ones, but wide enough to reach people through old-school friendships and favors. A few days after that, an elderly man I hadn't seen in years appeared in the lobby of my office. The receptionist said he insisted on speaking to me, said it was a private family matter. I filed a written request with Human Resources, asking for complete privacy from all non-approved visitors, and explained that I was facing family harassment. HR took it seriously. They logged the complaint, added security to my visitor profile, and offered to inform security guards directly. Later that day, my boss called me into his office again, but this time not for any complaint. He had heard about the situation and wanted to check in. What surprised me was how calmly he talked about it. How he told me that he too had gone through something similar years ago with his own father over business ownership. That conversation lasted barely 10 minutes, but it reset something in my mind. I wasn't the only one. People deal with hidden wars in families all the time. They just don't talk about them unless someone else does first. That was the moment I knew I wasn't going back, not even to explain myself. No more giving them chances to twist my words, no more guilt, no more invitations. Exactly 1 week after the confrontation at my parents' house, a small brown package showed up outside my apartment door. There was no return address, but my name was written across the front in a handwriting I recognized. Inside were several torn family photos, childhood birthdays, school ceremonies, a few festival portraits, and a single piece of paper with 4 words written in thick black ink: "You'll regret this." I placed everything back inside the box, sealed it again, and took it straight to the local police station. I filed a general report and handed over the box as evidence. They listened, took notes, and said that while there wasn't a direct threat, it would be kept on record. That was enough for now. That same evening, I bought 2 indoor security cameras, one for the front hallway and another for the living room window facing the street. I set up the app and turned on motion alerts. I also spoke to my building manager and asked if anyone had tried to reach my floor in the last few days. He checked the logs and told me that an older man had shown up 3 days earlier, said he was family, and tried to follow another resident inside when the front desk stopped him. Security footage confirmed it was my father. I took that footage back to the police again. They acknowledged it but said there wasn't enough for a charge, just a record. They suggested I continue documenting everything and alert them if it escalated. A few days later, I was in the middle of a client meeting when the receptionist buzzed my desk and said someone was downstairs claiming a family emergency. I checked the name. It was my eldest brother, the one I had already blocked. I called my lawyer that afternoon and explained everything, from the package to the workplace visit. Within 24 hours, a cease and desist letter was formally sent to every known family contact: my parents, both brothers, and their spouses. The message was clear: stay away from my home and my workplace. I thought that might slow things down. It didn't. Later that week, one of my co-workers pulled me aside after lunch. She looked uncomfortable. She had received a message request on Facebook from a woman claiming to be my mother. The message was long and emotional, filled with accusations that I had been brainwashed, that I was mentally unstable, and that I was being manipulated by foreign values against the family. My coworker didn't respond but showed me the message and blocked the account immediately. I went home that evening and wiped my online presence clean. Every account that could be traced, Facebook, LinkedIn, even an old gaming profile, was either locked down or deleted. I enabled two-factor authentication on everything, deleted all distant relatives, removed photo tags, changed usernames. I erased the version of myself they had access to. Still, rumors spread. A childhood neighbor called one night, speaking quietly like she didn't want someone overhearing her. She said people in the community were talking, that my parents were telling everyone I had lost my mind and needed help, that some were saying I had fallen under the influence of bad company. She urged me to come home before things got permanent. Then came the bank alert. Multiple failed login attempts on my checking account, all from an unfamiliar IP address. I called the bank and had everything transferred to a new account under a different branch. I requested a security flag be added to my file in case of further attempts. I also moved my savings to a separate institution entirely and set all future paychecks to deposit there. The very next day, I received an email from my old university asking to confirm whether my father had permission to access my academic records. Apparently, he had reached out, claiming he needed them for a medical evaluation. I denied the request and immediately filed a revocation of third-party access. They flagged the file and promised no one would get in again without my signed approval. That's when it became crystal clear. This wasn't emotional guilt. This was a coordinated effort to destabilize my life one piece at a time. I sent every update, every login attempt, every message, every police visit to my lawyer. He started building a case file and advised me to keep journaling everything, so I did. Every call I ignored, every number I blocked, every time my building security reported someone loitering near the gate, I took photos, saved timestamps, filed copies. I made sure there was a record for everything because by then, I understood one thing without doubt: this wouldn't stop. It wouldn't quiet down. It wasn't something that would go away with time or kindness or patience. It was a campaign, and I was going to outlast it, one documented step at a time. A few days after I secured my online accounts and bank records, something else surfaced. An old childhood friend forwarded me screenshots from a family group chat. Someone had started sharing photos from a beach vacation we took years ago. In one, I was shirtless, holding a drink and laughing with a few friends. The captions were edited to say things like reckless embarrassment and manipulated by outsiders. There were over 10 pictures posted across different group threads, all twisted to make it look like I had spiraled out of control. Names were tagged, comments were piling up. The next morning, I got called into HR. They said someone claiming to be my father had phoned the office, insisting I was mentally unstable and posed a threat to workplace safety. He mentioned fabricated incidents, one about a supposed breakdown, another about missing money. Thankfully, I had already submitted a warning to HR about possible family interference. They logged the call, flagged it as harassment, and told me I was fully supported. Still, they advised I tighten access to visitors and avoid public company directories for the time being. After leaving the office, I sat down with my lawyer and sent a final legal notice to my parents through official channels. The message was firm: if another attempt was made to defame, interfere, or contact me through professional or social circles, we would proceed with civil action. The letter included a timeline of every incident so far, complete with documentation. That weekend, I came home late from the grocery store and noticed something odd. The hallway smelled like paint. When I reached my apartment door, I froze. Sprayed across it in bright red letters were two phrases: traitor and selfish son. I called the police immediately. My door camera had caught everything. Two figures, hooded, rushed in just after midnight. The footage showed my cousin and my older brother clearly enough for identification. The officers took a copy of the video and filed a report for vandalism and harassment. Both of them were called in for questioning the next day. While they weren't arrested due to lack of prior criminal activity, they were formally warned any further contact in any form would result in legal escalation. That warning didn't last long. A week later, I received a message from an unknown number. It was my distant aunt, someone I barely spoke to even when I lived at home. She claimed she wanted to mediate, said I needed to meet her just once and end this peacefully. I ignored her at first, but curiosity got the better of me. I traced the number through a reverse lookup app. It was registered to an address suspiciously close to my parents. I blocked her number immediately. I also contacted my building manager again, who then pulled up visitor logs for the week. It turned out she had visited the front desk 2 days prior and asked about me. When they refused to give her my unit number, she left, but not before handing the desk a handwritten note asking me to reconsider before permanent damage is done. She didn't get in, but that was enough. The next day, I received a warning letter from the building's board. It said that repeated disturbances tied to my unit were a breach of peace and could result in lease termination if not addressed. I didn't argue. I knew I had to leave before things escalated again. I found a short-term sublet across the city through a CO worker who was moving abroad for a few months. I packed everything overnight, no announcement, no forwarding address. I paid the lease in advance, signed new papers, and began updating all official documents, driver's license, HR forms, bank details, insurance, and delivery accounts. I also hired a private mail handling service. From then on, all mail would go to a secure P.O. box that filtered, scanned, and forwarded select items to my real address. Even if someone tried tracking me through utility bills or postal records, they'd hit a dead end. That night, just as I was settling into the new place, I got a voice message from an old neighbor. He didn't say much, just whispered that there had been talk of a legal move, that my parents were getting serious now, and that they were planning something involving paperwork and mental health. I forwarded the message to my lawyer and scheduled a meeting for the next morning. We sat down and began preparing a preemptive defense. The goal wasn't just to protect myself from stalking anymore. The signs were shifting. This wasn't about anger, shame, or money. It was about power, and they were getting ready to make a legal claim that I wasn't capable of managing my own life. That kind of move wasn't just personal, it was dangerous because if they succeeded, they wouldn't just have access to my money again, they'd have access to everything. A few days after I moved into the short-term sublet, the manager of my old apartment building called to inform me about a recent incident. He sounded tense. My parents, along with several relatives, had shown up at the front gate with a printed photo of me and claimed I was missing. They demanded entry, saying they needed to check the unit in case something had happened to me. When the staff refused, things escalated. According to the manager, they started banging on the door, shouting my name, and even attempted to pick the lock. One of my former neighbors filmed the entire thing from across the hall. The video clearly showed my father, mother, older brother, and a cousin, all involved. The footage also caught my cousin holding a piece of wire near the lock, trying to force it open. The manager sent me the video. I forwarded it straight to my lawyer and the local police. We updated the case file, and the attempted break-in was formally added as criminal trespass and continued harassment. Later that week, the police followed up on the vandalism charges from my previous building. Since my cousin and older brother had already been warned, they were each fined for property damage but avoided jail time because they had no prior convictions. My lawyer pressed for stricter consequences, but the court deemed the fine and written warning sufficient, at least for now. Just when I thought they might pull back, another surprise came knocking, literally. A religious elder from our community showed up at my door in full attire, holding a prayer book and carrying a message of peace. My mother had sent him. He began with calm words about family unity and forgiveness, but then pivoted to pressure. He implied that I was bringing shame upon my lineage, and that spiritual consequences could follow. I stood there, let him speak without interruption, then told him he needed to leave. I didn't raise my voice or argue. I just repeated that his presence was uninvited and unwelcome. Once he left, I filed a report for religious coercion and unlawful entry attempt. It wasn't an arrest-level situation, but I wanted a paper trail. Every visit was now part of a growing campaign. I changed my phone number again the same day. This time, I used a company-issued device that only HR and 2 trusted friends had access to. I disconnected my personal SIM and deactivated all backup messaging apps. From then on, I made sure no family member or their connections had any way to reach me directly. But then something unexpected happened. One evening, I was cooking dinner when there was a knock at the door. No buzz, no message, just a knock. I checked the camera and saw my second brother standing there alone, with no bag or phone in sight. He looked pale, like he hadn't slept in days. I hesitated, then opened the door. He stepped inside slowly and didn't sit. He warned me that the family was considering filing for partial guardianship, though no official steps had been confirmed yet. They were claiming I was mentally unwell, unstable, and incapable of handling finances. He said they planned to use my sudden move, blocked contact, and the previous incident at the apartment as evidence. He wasn't there to help, he was there to warn. I listened without interrupting, then thanked him for coming and walked him to the door. He didn't say goodbye, just left slowly and disappeared into the night. I haven't heard from him since. The next morning, I sat down with my lawyer and handed over everything: medical records, clean employment evaluations, character letters from my manager, and my updated rental contracts. I also reached out to my therapist, who had already seen me for several sessions. She agreed to write a full statement verifying that I was mentally sound and facing targeted harassment. If it came to court, she would testify. My lawyer advised me to begin recording every conversation from now on. Phone calls, door visits, even accidental run-ins. If someone mentioned my family, even indirectly, I needed to log it. He also said we should start preparing for a potential no-contact order. The challenge was that there hadn't been any physical violence, just manipulation and attempts to trap me legally. Still, we began drafting the documentation required for a protective order if needed. That same week, I tried reaching out to my second brother again. He didn't answer. No texts, no replies, nothing. I tried twice and then stopped. Whatever his role was in this situation, it ended at my doorstep that night. Exactly 7 days later, I was served. A formal petition had been filed by my parents at the local civil court. They were seeking legal guardianship, citing erratic behavior, financial recklessness, and estrangement from the family as proof that I needed supervision. The papers were delivered by a court official, neatly packaged, signed, and dated. It was official now. They weren't just trying to control me anymore, they were trying to own me. After getting served with the guardianship petition, I brought in a second lawyer who specializes in defense against these types of filings. My first lawyer handled everything up to this point: harassment, trespassing, online defamation, but this was a different battlefield. Guardianship law is complex, and if not handled properly, it can hand full legal control of your life over to someone else. The new lawyer immediately got to work. Together, we built a portfolio thick enough to collapse a desk. It included copies of my employment contracts, pay stubs, annual tax returns, apartment leases, medical history, and the detailed session notes from my therapist. We also gathered written references, one from my current manager, one from a former supervisor at my last job, and even a landlord from a shared rental I lived in 3 years ago. Every document showed stability, reliability, and clear independence. My manager didn't hesitate. He wrote a character reference and formally offered to testify if the case escalated. His letter focused on my work ethic, communication skills, and the fact that I'd never missed a deadline or caused a problem since day one. I added it to the file. When the court date arrived, the judge scanned the petition from my parents. Their claims were dramatic. They said I had suffered multiple mental breakdowns, was under foreign influence, and had recklessly mismanaged family wealth. The judge paused after reading the first page and asked if they had submitted any verified medical documentation to support the accusations. They didn't. I presented clean medical records and a formal statement from my therapist, confirming I was mentally well, emotionally stable, and facing prolonged psychological pressure from my family. The judge read every page. Their lawyer flipped through their empty folder, trying to fill silence. Then my father stood up and shouted that the court was part of the same modern sickness that ruins tradition. He called the judge young and corrupt and claimed the entire legal system had turned against parents. The judge issued a formal warning for contempt and postponed the case, giving them time to revise their petition if they could. He also requested a full psychological evaluation, not for me, but to determine if the accusations had any legitimate root. He made it clear that making baseless guardianship claims was a serious abuse of the system. That week, I received a quiet heads-up from someone I hadn't spoken to in years, a former neighbor who had seen everything unfold from the sidelines. He told me my family was now trying to pull in a cousin who worked with local political groups. The idea was to create pressure behind the scenes, possibly to sway an internal court process or delay decisions. My lawyer responded instantly. We filed for an emergency protection hearing and submitted a formal application for a temporary restraining order. We didn't have evidence of physical harm yet, but the judge's warning at the last hearing, combined with the history of harassment, was enough to justify the move. A few days later, my building manager called me into the office. They had received an anonymous envelope addressed to whom it may concern. Inside was a typed letter accusing me of laundering money and using my apartment as a front. It had no signature or supporting documents, just vague, inflammatory language. I handed over my case file and walked the manager through the timeline. I showed them the police reports, the legal filings, and the security footage logs. That shut the issue down fast. They documented the incident and assured me my lease was unaffected. Out of nowhere, a mutual friend reached out with a short message. It was from my second brother, the same one who had warned me weeks ago about the guardianship filing and then disappeared. He hadn't written much, just a sentence saying the family had asked him to testify in court. He said they wanted him to back up their claims. He told them no. I read the message twice, then replied with one line, "If you ever get called into court, just tell the truth. That's all I'll ever ask. No more attempts were made to reach me after that, no calls, no surprise visitors, no new messages. But the next court date was already set, and I knew they wouldn't walk in quietly. They had lost control of me once, now they were trying to take it back with paperwork. 2 nights before the next court hearing, just past midnight, my motion sensor camera sent a real-time alert to my phone. I opened the live feed and saw someone crouched near my door. They were fiddling with the lock, wearing gloves, hood up, body angled to avoid the camera. I hit the emergency line right away. By the time the police arrived, the person was gone, but the footage was saved, crystal clear, and handed over. The next morning, my lawyer reviewed the video and immediately matched the car parked outside with one already tied to a previous vandalism incident. The registration belonged to the same cousin who spray-painted my old apartment door months earlier. I submitted the footage and car details to both the court and the police. That same week, a neighbor came forward on her own, reporting that she had seen the same cousin loitering around the building for 3 consecutive days. She remembered the car too, same make, same license plate. With both eyewitness support and hard evidence, my lawyer submitted a new request for a fast-tracked hearing on the restraining order. The case, now backed by surveillance, police reports, and witness statements, had reached a tipping point. While we waited for the court's response, another wave of rumors started circulating in the community. This time, the narrative had changed. According to someone's version of the story, I wasn't just mentally unwell, I had been corrupted by outsiders who wanted to dismantle family values. That phrase, anti-family outsiders, started showing up in old WhatsApp threads from relatives I had long blocked. One morning, I received a voicemail from a distant uncle. His voice was slurred, and the message was filled with curses and threats. He accused me of dragging the family through the mud and warned me to stop this shame before it gets permanent. I forwarded the audio to my lawyer and attached it to the ongoing harassment file. The same day, the police logged it under my active protection request. The court date arrived. The hearing started with a review of all submitted evidence, the previous break-in attempt, the vandalism charges, the unsolicited religious visit, the recent lock tampering, and now the voicemail. Then came the medical portion. The court reviewed my therapist's statement, work records, and clean psychological history. The judge asked one question, whether any licensed professional had ever diagnosed me with a mental health condition. The answer in writing was no. After that, the guardianship petition was officially dismissed. The judge called it a malicious misuse of the court system, criticized the lack of evidence, and warned that any similar filing in the future would be considered contempt. My parents, present in court, didn't speak. Their lawyer tried to pivot the argument, but the judge cut it off. The case was over. Outside the courthouse, as I was leaving, a woman with a press badge approached me. She asked for a statement regarding my recent guardianship case and the family controversy unfolding online. I told her I had no comment, didn't authorize any story, and walked away. By the time I got home, I had already called my lawyer again. A legal notice was immediately drafted and sent to the media outlet she worked for, stating that no publication of my name, likeness, or legal records was permitted without explicit written consent. We later found out how it happened. A friend of my second brother, someone who had heard the story in fragments, had assumed the whole situation was public and shared it with a local journalist looking for a dramatic family feature. It wasn't malicious, just careless. I contacted my second brother through the same mutual friend he'd used before. I didn't yell or threaten. I just told him, keep my name out of everything moving forward. No stories, no side comments, nothing. That week, I made one final sweep of every possible access point. I contacted HR and flagged every family member by name in my employee file. None of them could ever be added as an emergency contact again. I called my bank and added an internal alert listing known threats to prevent account access through social pretext. I had my lease amended to include a clause for zero contact from known individuals under police watch. Even my delivery app, insurance provider, and utility services were updated to restrict third-party inquiries. Every door they once used, directly or indirectly, was now locked. This time not with words or warnings, but with systems. 1 month after the court dismissed the guardianship case, I submitted a formal request through my company's relocation program. I asked for a transfer to another branch in a different city, far enough that no one could just show up unannounced. The approval came through in under 3 weeks. The new position came with a slight pay bump and relocation support. I didn't hesitate. I registered a new phone number under a corporate alias that didn't trace back to my full legal name. The number was connected only to company systems and used strictly for work and verified contacts. No public listings, no directory traces. Every other number I'd ever used was shut down for good. The morning of the move, the moving truck pulled up just after sunrise. I was the only one loading it. No friends, no helpers, just a checklist and silence. By 9 in the morning, I was on the road. I had barely crossed the highway out of town when I noticed a dark sedan behind me. Same distance, same lane changes, every turn matched mine. I didn't stop. I called Highway Patrol, gave them the plate number, and stayed steady. 20 minutes later, flashing lights pulled the sedan over briefly. I kept driving without stopping to avoid confrontation. 2 hours later, an officer called to confirm the vehicle was registered under my older brother. The passenger was my cousin, the same one involved in the spray painting incident. Both were detained, warned again, and released. A new report was entered into the system under ongoing stalking behavior. That was the last time I saw either of them. The new city was quieter. I moved into a secure apartment complex with layered access codes, camera-monitored entrances, and soundproof units. HR helped finalize the transfer and flagged my employee file with special privacy protocols. Only my direct manager and payroll coordinator had access to my records. No one else could view, modify, or forward any information without formal clearance. I also resumed therapy, this time focused entirely on long-term recovery from familial coercion. We worked through years of normalized control, the idea of identity as obedience, and how financial dependency had been passed down like tradition. For the first time, the sessions weren't about reacting, they were about rebuilding. Eventually, I joined a local support group for adults dealing with generational abuse, especially where money was used as leverage. No one knew who I was outside that room. Everyone had a story. Some had broken free, others were still in the middle of it. There was no judgment, just shared understanding. Weeks passed. Then one day, I got a visit from someone I hadn't seen since college, a friend who'd once shared a flat with me during our intern years. He looked nervous, said someone from my family had tracked him down through an old mutual connection, and handed him a letter to deliver personally. I asked if he had read it. He nodded but didn't share the details. It was a letter from my mother, handwritten, emotional, and asking for forgiveness before it's too late. Though I suspected it was part of their continued pressure, I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I thanked my friend, took the letter, and walked to the back alley near the building. I lit it with a match and watched it burn on the concrete until the ashes scattered in the wind. A week later, an envelope with gold lettering arrived in my mailbox. It was an invitation to a cousin's wedding. No message inside, no return address, just a formal card with a date, time, and location. I placed it straight in the trash. I hadn't spoken to that side of the family in over a year. I wasn't about to start now. It was a trap, and I wasn't walking into it. Soon after, my lawyer called. The court had approved permanent restraining orders against 3 individuals in my family, my older brother, my cousin, and my father. The documentation barred them from approaching me, contacting my workplace, or using intermediaries to reach out. Any violation would result in immediate arrest. That night, I started writing a journal, not to publish, not to post anywhere, just to remember. The goal wasn't to make peace, it was to preserve clarity. I didn't want to forget how far they went just to control one person's paycheck. I didn't want to let time soften what had really happened. Silently, I also set up a private donation account. It funds legal fees for people escaping coercive households, especially those where cultural expectations disguise abuse as duty. The fund doesn't carry my name, it doesn't need to. It just helps the next person walk away without looking back. Now, I walk to work most evenings. I take a longer route that passes under a quiet overpass with orange streetlights. I watch the traffic roll by slowly, like it has somewhere to be but no one to impress. It's not perfect, but it's mine, and no one else gets to touch it anymore.